Hi, I'm Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's a former park ranger who became the happiest podcaster on earth, no other than Mr. Jody Maberry.
Well, hello, Daniel. It's so great to be here with you.
Yes, likewise, Mr. Jody. And welcome on Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Well, you mentioned I am a former park ranger. That is true, and the introduction was former park ranger who became the happiest podcaster on earth. There's a couple of things involved there. One, yes, I was a former
Yes.
park ranger, and two, I am a podcaster now. The reason I say I'm the happiest podcaster on earth, one is to get attention because you might ask, why does he say that? Well, I'm lucky enough to get to work with a lot of former Disney people. The podcast that I do that is the most popular is called Creating Disney Magic with Lee Cockrell. Lee and I have done that show since 2014, and it's had we're 570 some episodes in, millions of downloads, and that show just makes me happy. And it's Disney, which is often called the happiest place on earth. So there you go. Former park
Yes.
ranger who became the happiest podcaster on earth.
Definitely. And we salute you for doing that. Happiest podcaster for sure. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, Mr. Jody, let's talk about your favorite word being a podcaster. Tell us, beyond just having a podcast, what is the single most important strategic goal a podcaster should define before they even record episode one?
Well, I think it is to have a plan to last. And here's what I mean. Most podcasts never make it to 10 episodes
Mm,
because when you launch a show, you're often driven by enthusiasm and excitement, and that fades after a little bit. So, what do you do when the enthusiasm, the excitement to finally be a podcaster fades? Well, you need to have a plan in place to make sure you keep going beyond episode 10. People get snagged along the way. They don't get that far. And I think you have to be prepared to go beyond that. And you do that with a plan. So before you even record your first episode, tell me what you're going to do for episode 11 and episode 15 and episode 20. Think out that far. Know what you're going to do for the first year. I would say now there are exceptions to this, which I'm happy to talk about. But I would say don't launch a podcast until you're prepared to talk about what you're going to do with it for the first year. I think you should commit to it for a year and then you can let it fade after that. Or commit to a podcast with a set number of episodes. So let's say you have a book, since we're going to talk books too. You have a book, you're an author and you have a book coming out. Well, decide to do 20 episodes and then that's it. Because if you start a podcast and it fades away in 6 episodes, you likely will never tell people that you did that. But if you intentionally do 10 episodes, 20 episodes based on your book, even once you stop, you will keep promoting that. So, my big advice before you record an episode, have it planned out. What am I going to do past episode 10? What am I going to do, first of all, to make sure I make it to episode 10? And then you won't fade away like the majority of all podcasts that are started.
majority, yes, of course. So, in a crowded market, how does a new podcaster find a niche or angle that is both authentic to them and has a real audience?
I think you have to begin by being who you are because that's the one thing that won't be on every other show. Don't don't copy Daniel because you like his show. Be inspired by Daniel and then start your own show. My first podcast, and it's still going to this day, I launched the first episodes in April of 2014. It's called the Park Leader Show. It's for park rangers. I assure you, if there can be a podcast for park rangers, there can be a podcast for whatever topic you're the most interested in. To this day, it is, well, there's one other podcast for park rangers, and I helped that gentleman launch that show. After all these years, there's still two podcasts for park rangers. That's it. So if you find your niche, the one thing you're really interested in, you won't have any problem being who you are. You won't have any problem building an audience because you are going to remain excited about it. You are going to keep learning about it. And that's what really draws your unique audience. You being excited about it, you being able to talk about it, people getting the chance to learn along with you. Yes, the audience does to some degree expect you to be an expert in what you're talking about, but they also want to learn along with you as you go through the process. And if you just pick a topic that you can't wait to learn more about, then it will help in both regards.
Yes, definitely. And thank you for that answer. And how has the role of a podcast evolved from pure entertainment to a core pillar of content marketing and personal branding?
Well, this is such a great opportunity, and I like that question because you can take any question people ask you, or peop people are asking questions that maybe aren't directly to you, but you see them being asked, and it's on your subject matter. Just record podcast episodes about it. And then that allows you to turn those into articles, into clips you can put on the, well, whatever social channel you like. It allows you to put them as Q&A of sorts where when people ask a question, you can say, "Oh, Daniel, I did a podcast episode on that. Here, give it a listen. Let me know if you have any questions." It allows you to build up a content catalog based on the things you want to keep talking about. And I have had podcast episodes that have turned into presentations that I give on stage. I've had one episode maybe where I touch on something and it gets enough questions where I then expand it. You will just find that as you create more content, it helps create more content. As you create more content, it allows you to keep positioning yourself as an expert in this one area. So it to some degree, it doesn't matter what you do. You could be a realtor, you could be a gardener, you could be a landscaper. You have an opportunity to use a podcast to educate people, continue to create content, to to become the source of answers when people have questions. And as long as you keep doing that, just stay focused on your subject matter. You can use the podcast to keep yourself the front of people's mind as the expert in that topic.
Mr. Jody, on content and production, what is your philosophy on interview style versus solo shows? What are the unique advantages and challenges of each format?
Well, when it comes, we'll talk interviews first. The great thing about interviews is it associates your name with the name of the person you're interviewing. That's always great. It allows you to build a bigger network. It allows you to ask that guest, is there anyone else I should talk to? It allows you to keep having conversations about your topic. And hopefully your guest reinforces what you've been saying all along. right? You have a guest come in and what they talk about enhances what you've been talking about. The challenge with interview shows is booking guests. That
Yes.
can that can end up being a challenge, finding enough guests, getting people to say yes, things like that. Can sometimes get in the way. When it comes to a solo based show, a monologue based show, there are some real benefits to that as well because this is my favorite thing overall about podcasting. When you have to show up every week with something to say, you start to learn how to talk about what you're an expert in. You learn what you believe in because if you have to talk about it every week, you learn how to talk about it, why you talk about it, when to talk about it. And then if someone asks you a question later on, you're so prepared because you've already talked about it. If you have a solo show, you can shape that content and direct that content towards what what you're building overall as a brand. Every episode just reinforces what it is that you do. You can do that to some degree with an interview show, but it's not quite as easy because you never know what the guest is going to say. The challenge with solo shows is a lot of people have trouble showing up every week with something to say. Now, I already said that's the best thing about podcasting. It can also be the hardest thing when it solely relies on you to show up and have something to say every week. It can get challenging. That's why with the Jody Maberry show, I blend it. I do solo episodes. I also often will have people I'm associated with come on the show and talk. And it just is a way for me to mix things up. The pressure's not on me every week to show up with something to say. The pressure's not on to always have a guest to talk to as well. And that works well for me to blend it. Now, I don't do that with every show I'm involved in, but that's what I do with the Jody Maberry show.
Yes, combination is good, people. So, what is the most common mistake you hear in podcast audio quality that instantly signals amateur hour, or how can it be easily fixed?
Well, I think that the easiest thing to fix is just spend the money to get a nice microphone. The microphone I'm using, I deliberately still use this microphone. It is the microphone I started with 11 years ago. It costs like $70 and the audio quality of it is good enough that unless you're an audiophile, you're not going to say anything negative about it. It sounds really good. Sure, there are $400 microphones that sound better, but for $70, you can't beat the sound. And I think to avoid cost and ease of use, people will go with other earbuds or whatever.
Hmm.
Just different aspects that you don't have to because you can get a fairly cheap microphone that is a 7 out of 10 on quality. Very low investment with a really big return because you will sound wonderful.
Sound amazing, people. Invest with a mic. Beyond good audio, Mr. Jody, what are the elements of a compelling podcast into a hooks a listener in a critical first 60 seconds?
Well, I think if you're doing a solo show and you want to hook people right away, start off telling a story. We all love story.
Yes.
It's a great way to bring people in. So this is what I do. I used to be a park ranger. Park rangers are really good at interpretation, and I brought over formulas from interpretation, being a park ranger, into podcasting. And I call it the SWAP method. SWAP because SWAP, S for story. Start off with a story, W for why it matters. It's why that story matters to the person listening, not why it matters to you. A is the action you want them to take, and then P is provoke. If you use that formula, tell a story, tell why it matters, the action you want them to take, and then spend the rest of the episode provoking them towards that action, you will have a great episode. But to turn it back to the question Daniel asked, first 60 seconds, start off with a story. If you bring them in with a story, they are likely to stick around to hear what you have to say.
Yes. Something interesting, people. And how do you structure the flow of an episode to maintain engagement and provide value, whether it's a 20-minute solo or cast or a 90-minute interview?
Well, so I'll answer this one based on interviews because what I like to do if I'm going to have a guest on the show, I will do my research and I will write down every question I think of as I research. Then I will go back and take all those questions and if you've done your research, you have a general idea of how questions might get answered. And I will not reformat, reorder the questions in a way that when the questions are answered, they end up telling a story or have a storyline where there's an introduction, you get to know somebody, find out why they do what they do. Then there's a challenge, then they overcome the challenge, and then there's a happy ending and here's what we all can learn from it. I think it's a very compelling structure that will keep people listening for an entire interview, whether that interview is 20 minutes or whether it's 90 minutes.
Indeed, Mr. Jody, indeed. And as a podcast host, what are your short term and long term goals?
Short term as a podcast host, I would just want to keep putting out content and episodes that entertain you and you learn a little bit from and help you get to know me. That's short term. Long term, I have big ideas on how using podcasts to write books, using podcasts as a way to continue to build platforms as my business evolves, as my speaking evolves. I've always used podcasts as the stepping stone or the platform on which I stand on to build the next thing. Everything I have done in my business over the last 12 years has been built on the back of podcasts. So when I get a new idea, this is something I want to do. I always look at how can I use a podcast to help me do that? How can I use a podcast to position me this way or to meet the people I need to meet? So short term, it's always great entertaining episodes, which will always be a short term goal because that plays into the longer term. So short term, great content, long term, using a podcast to advance my network, the people that I want to keep promoting and myself towards my next bigger evolution of the business.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Jody, and looking forward for more success and more empowering, more podcasts to come. And can you please give a piece of advice for those people out there who want to be a podcast host like us?
I would say the best thing you can do if you want to start a podcast, just do it. Now, that sounds simple. I know it's really easy advice to give, but what you will find instead of continuing to plan, continuing to say, I want to do it, the good work happens once you're already in motion because you can plan a podcast over and over and over, but you can't make it better by continuing to plan to do something you haven't done. Once you start, you will understand how I can make this better what I can do next episode differently. I want to change my intro because that didn't feel right when I did it. You can understand how to be a better podcast interviewer. It all comes down to getting those episodes started. Because I promise you, I've done so many shows and I've helped people launch shows. You cannot get better until you get moving. Planning only takes you so far. Yes, the initial planning is important, but you will get to a level that you cannot improve it anymore on paper. You have to actually start a show. So that's my advice. If you want to be a podcaster, the absolute best thing you can do for yourself is start recording, even if that means record some episodes only for yourself so you can hear how you sound, so you know what it's like talking into a microphone with no one else there. There are people that are wildly successful speakers that have a little trouble talking when no one else is in the room. Maybe that's you, but you won't know it until you get going. There are also people who do not have a speaking career and are tremendous behind the microphone because they can sit alone in a room like this and have a great conversation and articulate their ideas very well. Maybe that's you, but you won't
Yes.
know until you get started.
Just do it, people. Just do it. If you have the passion to be a podcast host, stop procrastinating and do it. Thank you for that, Mr. Jody, for that advice. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence you as a podcast host?
All right. I will say a great book that influenced me in my daily life, my professional life, and as a podcast host is QBQ by John Miller. QBQ stands for Question Behind the Question. Read that book. Very short read. You can easily read it in a day and then read it again next week. Once you understand personal accountability, you will understand that you have the power, the authority, and the responsibility to take care of your things yourself. Once you understand that, you will realize I have the power to accomplish anything I want. It's up to me to start a podcast. It's up to me to make sure it's a great podcast. That QBQ by John Miller, fabulous book.
Highly recommended, people, and thank you for that recommendation, Mr. Jody. And what's the next big trend in podcasting that most people are not paying attention to yet?
Well, I think there's a couple of things going on that I feel like will make a difference. And one is internal podcasts for organizations, meaning if I have a business and we're spread out geographically or have different shifts, a podcast is how the leaders will communicate with the rest of the team.
Hmm.
So internal podcasts. Also, I think small. Uh, I don't even know the word for it yet, but I think you're going to see small podcasts that are there for just a short time for a specific reason will show up, like almost like events, like an online summit or
Yes.
something. I think those type of audio only events, I feel like we're going to see more of those because by now podcasting has just become something more people are familiar with, and we're going to see more events show up as audio only podcasts that maybe are just around for a short amount of time.
Yes, I agree with that, Mr. Jody. Most of the movies that they are doing right now, they're having a podcast, and at the end, they stop doing it once the movie's already launched. So, what is the most underestimated personal skill required to be a successful podcaster that nothing to do with the teach or content?
Curiosity. If you are just excited to learn, you're going to do very well as a podcaster because, yes, a podcast is a performance, but your performance will be better if you're curious. That goes for interview based shows because you want to learn what the other person has to say, but it also goes for solo based shows. I mentioned earlier that your audience wants to learn along with you. And if you're curious and you keep pushing and you keep asking questions and you keep looking for the next thing, it will make for a great show. So if you don't feel like you're that curious of a person, I think you can practice it. You can start asking why. Why does this work that way? Why did they do that? And just practice being curious. And if you feel like you're already an expert and you don't have much to learn, I say yeah, you probably still do, but even then, think of the curiosity from the person listening. They don't know what you know. So explain it in a way that helps them learn and makes them continue to ask, why? Tell me more. So understanding curiosity and being curious will make you a better podcaster.
Yes, people, be curious. Who knows, you will be the next Einstein. And so, Mr. Jody, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in fourth season, on my baby podcast, Law 101 and Mental Health 101, Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 Review and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Jody, what's the piece of advice you ever received about podcasting that had nothing to do with the microphones or download numbers?
The advice that I got actually was about speaking on a stage, but it applies to podcasting.
Yes.
My business partner, Lee Cockrell, what one time I was talking to him about, I gave a presentation on stage. I left a big chunk of it out and I was feeling kind of bad that I messed up. And he said, no one else knew what you were going to say. So
Yes.
just keep going. If you make a mistake, just keep going. Don't call attention to it. That is such good advice for podcasters because
True.
you maybe have this idea of what you're going to talk about. You forget a piece of it, you leave a chunk out. Doesn't matter. Just keep going. No one knew what you were going to say. So just keep going. Don't let a mistake, a mess up, leaving part of it out ruin your episode. Nobody knew. Just do it. Just keep moving.
Just moving and let it go, people. Make sure you learn from your mistake and make it better and better and better every day. Miss Jody, Mr. Jody Maberry, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your podcast, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
All right. If you go to jodymayberry.com, there is a podcast tab. On that tab, you can scroll down and look at all the podcasts that I do. And if you just check those out, I think you'll enjoy one. If you like what I had to say, check out the Jody Mayberry Show.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Jody Maberry because if you support him for sure, more and more empowering podcasts to come. So, Mr. Jody, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
Monticom people, see you soon.